Hello and welcome back to the Wandering Cantos. Today we're going to be taking a look at Assassin's Creed Mirage. So I wanted to start things off with a quick spoiler warning that we will be discussing Assassin's Creed Mirage, but we will also be discussing Assassin's Creed Valhalla. So just be aware of that. So now that we can jump into it, I gotta say, I feel like every once in a while, I'll get into sort of a rut with gaming where I'll feel like I've played pretty much every game I'm interested in that's currently out. I certainly haven't played every game, and I know there's tons of good games I haven't played, but they're either not on my radar or I'm just not in the mood for it. I really have like sort of a limited time for being able to play games, so I'm kind of picky with what I play. But so every once in a while I'll want to unwind with a game and I won't really know what to boot up. And I sort of entered one of those phases recently. And, long story short, I decided to try Mirage, which is a game I originally was not very interested in. So the thing is I actually am a pretty big Assassin's Creed fan. I've played Black Flag, Mirage, Odyssey, Origin, Valhalla, and now Mirage. I've not checked out Shadow, and I haven't played the first two, which I get is notable since Mirage is sort of a callback to the style of the original Assassin's Creed games. That's where I'm coming from in terms of this review. That's sort of my background context. But yeah, sort of a weird game. Those who have played it will know that there's sort of not a whole lot to talk about because it's oddly sort of a just standard story. It's actually a bit banal, but I'm getting a bit ahead of myself, so let's transition over to the chalkboard and we can get into it. All right, and before we fully jump into this, I gotta ask, are you guys liking the sort of chalkboard aesthetic? I put it into dark mode forever ago, so it would be a bit less blinding, but I'm a bit interested in trying to figure out how to incorporate a bit more color. I recently changed my own computer to being back to a light scheme rather than the dark scheme, and I forgot how it sort of lends itself well to some of the accent colors and just makes it look a bit more cheery. Sometimes dark mode bums me out. I think the season changes are getting to me and daylight savings and all that, but that little tangent aside, let's jump into it. So this is sort of a weird game because within the sort of, Assassin's Creed fan base, we sort of have two pools or camps. We have the ones who like the old style games and the ones who like the new sort of like open world RPG style games. And I started Assassin's Creed in terms of the first game I played that was similar, around release date was Odyssey. And then after that, I went back and played some of the older games and then also played Valhalla when it came out. So for me, I like the open world RPG stuff. I feel like I've never been super interested in this sort of like modern day plot line, and in these newer games they've really like toned that down. The modern stuff is like very small. So here's my sort of hot take with Assassin's Creed games. I feel like all the sci-fi stuff and the modern stuff and the VR and the Animus and the Isu stuff, it sort of takes me out of it. I get that some people really appreciate that plot line, and I'm not trying to criticize it, but so I went into Odyssey as my first one, and I was just excited that there was going to be a game that was going to be taking place in ancient Greece with Greek mythology and all of that. And I didn't know any of the lore of Assassin's Creed, so I went into it, and I immediately was like super turned off by the fact that it's sort of like a VR game that's being played by I can't even remember their name, but like a modern day crew. And on sort of a meta level, I just don't really enjoy that like immersion break. I just want to think that I'm being like Cassandra or Alexios, Eivor, etc. I don't like thinking that I'm actually someone else who's controlling Alexios or Eivor, and there's sort of a weird contradiction that we're not actually seeing history because we're seeing like a simulation of history, and therefore some of the decisions that are being made and some of the like literally like how they walk and run around might actually be being informed by the modern day audience. So I wasn't a really big fan of that. And then in Valhalla, I thought it was pretty interesting. The whole twist with like Odin and Loki and everybody is that they were actually like Isu people. And at first I sort of liked it because I thought it was sort of tragic that like the Odin we knew and loved and all of that cool Norse mythology and all that didn't actually exist. But I kind of found it almost more interesting until that final reveal occurs where you see it's all like super sci-fi and we see that like Odin is in like a super sci-fi suit. I kind of thought it was almost like more like tragically interesting if it really was like Norse gods and, you know, reincarnation and bloodlines and mortals, and like the old world is dying with Ragnarok and then the new world was born, and so like these gods sort of don't have a place in the new world. I thought all of that was sort of interesting, but again, the sci-fi aspects kind of took me out of it. So that being said, with Mirage, I really appreciated that we didn't really get a lot of the whole modern-y stuff. That was sort of like subdued / not even really there, because it's actually serving as a prequel to Valhalla, where it's sort of explaining, you know, how did Basem connect with the Loki and all of that. That being said, to sort of like, let me clean the slate a bit. The story of this one is, in my opinion, extremely boring. I actually almost quit playing this game at one point because I was sort of just so like, I just don't care. It would be like, oh, you have to go to this fortress and investigate something, and I had like zero emotional connection to it. And I was sort of like bummed by my lack of emotional connection. Also, with all the other games, it was usually like a much grander, like the battles were huge in older games. And then in this one, the battles were like 5 people versus maybe 20. They were really small. Like in Valhalla, there's this amazing set piece. It's not historically accurate, but it looks cool. It's awesome, where these Viking ships are like sailing against this like Saxon tower, and arrows that have been lit on fire are like raining down on them. It's like a total like D-Day Saving Private Ryan moment, but it's cool. It just is. It felt epic and fun. And in this one, the battles were like whimpers. So sort of disappointing in that regard. And then, but anyway, to go with the story, I felt like it was sort of boring because for the most part, in a way that seems interesting on paper, but is actually pretty boring in execution, it's kind of like the average day in the life of an assassin, where all of the other ones feel like they're taking place during these epic scale moments in the history of the assassins or the Templars, or, you know, the hidden ones, the Order of the Ancients, all that stuff. It always feels like it's like, oh, the Vikings are arriving in England and it's during this time period where they're taking over all of England, or it's during the French Revolution, or it's during the American Revolution, or the golden age of piracy and all of this stuff. But this one kind of feels like it takes place during a more subdued one, because ultimately the reason we're even looking at this time period is because of Basem, because what happens to Basem specifically ultimately is like a very significant chapter in the history of the assassins. But it's like low-key just kind of boring, because it's sort of just like, they investigate their sworn enemy of, the Order and the Cult, and they assassinate, like 6 people. And then at the very, very end, it finally gets interesting where Basem goes into this underground temple. He finds all the Isu artifacts and technology, and he basically awakens the memories of past lives of Loki and kind of fuses with that, so we get part Basem, part Loki, all in one body. And then it basically explains, so then when you play Valhalla, you kind of understand how Basem / Loki woke up with these memories and all of that. So that part was really cool and surprisingly emotional. I believe her name is Nigh. Seems like she's his childhood friend, but she's actually a figment of his imagination. It's not the first time we've seen this plot line. I guess I won't spoil other stories by giving examples, but there's some very famous, let's say, multiplayer shooter games that have a single player plot line that has this, and it's also movies, etc. And so, but it's still cool. It's one of those tropes I've always enjoyed. It always kind of gets me on an emotional level, so I'm not really going to complain about that. I thought it was pretty interesting, especially because there's this moment that always chokes me up. I don't know why. I'm like a sucker for this, where the main character is talking to the figment of their imagination, and they're basically like, "Will I ever see you again?" And then the figment of the imagination is like, "No, not anymore, but I'll always be with you one way or another." And that always makes me feel lonely and sad. So the ending got me. And so right after the ending, when you go back into the open world and you get the offer for, New Game Plus, I sort of felt like I actually felt pretty sad, and suddenly all of the music felt really sad to me because it felt like we had lost this character who was pretty interesting, and you feel bad because also you're kind of sad for Basem, because even though Basem seems to sort of be pro this and sort of wants it because he is Loki, Loki is a previous version of him from a past life, at the same time the Basem we know and love seems to be gone, and his bird eagle seems to be aware of this because it scratches his face at the end, which makes me think that we are supposed to sort of interpret this as being sort of sad, because it's sort of I don't know, I guess it's in a way, here, let me clear this up, in a way it's sort of a loss of innocence, but it's interesting because it's a loss of innocence through sort of the fulfillment / development of character. By the end of his character development, he kind of just lost himself in a way, because or at the very least, if not innocence, it's the loss of Basem as we knew it, which is also technically as he knew himself. Because I wonder if we could interview just Basem, who's not fused with Loki at the end of the plot, would that Basem say he regrets it, going into the temple and regrets the fusion, or is he just totally on board with it? It's sort of confusing, and not confusing, it's sort of ambiguous and left up to interpretation. But yeah, so the ending, that part's interesting. The rest of it, not interesting at all. It is the most standard. They said this feels like what the assassins are up to in between all of the cool parts of their timeline, average day in the life, what were they doing before the French Revolution, etc. It's just they're constantly just fighting the Templars, all that stuff. As for the other stuff, we got our gameplay, we got our graphics, map design. So gameplay, I actually thought it was pretty fun, and I'm going to give it, an A+. I thought for it being a stealth game, it was actually pretty fun, although it kind of falls for the weird kind of pit trap that a lot do, where it gets more fun the more perks you get. but as a result, the opening is super boring because you don't have any cool abilities. And so, like, on the one hand, it's like, just be patient, you're gonna get, your perks. But on the other hand, it's like, it is just boring gameplay. But by the end, when you get into the flow state of it and you kind of get used to the parry system and the dodge system and all that. That being said, I did not feel like the combat had enough weight to it. It kind of felt weird where it felt like Valhalla's combat had like a ton of punch to it. Like Eivor was like a super like slow, hulky character who like whenever he was doing stealth and trying to do parkour, it just felt uncomfortable. But when he was like bashing people in with a shield and his axes and all that, it was actually really, really fun and had like a visceral, satisfying feeling to it. Where in this one, swords felt like totally like lightweight, and like it kind of reminded me of like the old like Black Flag kind of combat where you weren't really doing it, because like in Black Flag you would sort of like press like square and triangle, and then suddenly your character on screen would like slash the enemy in a really interesting way and be moving all around them. So it looked cinematic, but as a gamer, you weren't actually doing much. It didn't feel like you were doing it. And then in Odyssey almost has sort of like Dark Souls-esque combat. I feel like that's gonna rile some feathers, but all I mean is that you truly are the one who gets to like roll and slash at the person and do parry, and it's all like time-based, and like if Yora's character rolls and dodges an incoming arrow and then slashes a guy, parries another guy, and then shoots an arrow at the third guy, like you did that. You had to choose creatively to choose those inputs and click it all correctly, while in the older games it kind of felt more like you would just click square and your character would just do all of that. But as a result, with the older games, some of the combat kind of like felt disconnected from what you were doing with your controller, and similarly with this one, it kind of felt that way at times where I don't know, I just felt like when I was slashing at enemies, it felt like the swords were sort of just going through an invisible NPC and it wasn't actually like making contact, which is sort of a bummer. I'm really interested to see what Shadows does in terms of combat, if it feels visceral and good and satisfying, or if it's I guess more like this one. Graphics, they were good. It's very similar to Valhalla, so it's very like, if you liked Valhalla and you liked its sort of aesthetics, its interface, all that stuff, you're gonna like this. In fact, most of the time while I was playing this one, I was sort of just craving Valhalla, and I kind of want to replay it, but it's like the longest game in the world, and so I'm like, God, do I really want to replay the whole game? But part of me wants to replay it now that I have this extra context of Basm and I sort of understand, the prequel and what took place before it. But at the same time, I don't know if I have it in me to fully revisit what's going to ultimately be like 100+ hours that has definitely some slogs, because I also haven't ever played any of the DLC for that one. So I'm trying to see, if you eventually, months from now see a review on that game, you'll know that tonight I started playing that game. But map design, I thought they did a really great job of making this world look really beautiful and interesting. I was sort of unsure how they were going to make a sort of desert setting look interesting, just because the landscapes tend to be sort of monochromatic, but there were tons of like lush flowers and greenery, and the flowers I especially appreciated the way they would put like pink and blue flowers, and like they almost served as like natural rooftops, and like it just added a really cool pop of color and made the whole world look very sublime and interesting. So I did really appreciate that. I always feel like the Assassin's Creed games, they get kind of clowned on because they do pretty much all of the like major sins of like modern day open world games, where there's microtransactions, time wasters, waypoints everywhere, all of that stuff. But I will say they nail the environmental design. I feel like Odyssey, or Origins, Valhalla, this one, and the bits I've seen of Even Shadows, and obviously even the older ones like Black Flag, but that didn't have as many issues. The world design is always so good, especially visually. I feel like there is the one thing that's always sort of weird is I feel like the sound design is like not as good, because like when you're walking through a forest in like Skyrim or Witcher, I feel like you hear the forest way more, and like in Witcher, like you hear the insects and the wind blowing through and how the wind sounds on the leaves and the tall grass and all of that. I always felt like in Valhalla that like wasn't there. Like I wanted to hear more like buzzing insects, crackling fireplaces, and just like more sound ambience. So kind of felt like that with this one too. I didn't feel like there was a ton going on with the sound. But yeah, what else? So implications for the series. I don't really remember what Basim is doing at the end of Valhalla, only that he sort of like escaped and is doing more evil stuff. But is he really evil? That's sort of the interesting question. He's kind of evil because he's getting revenge on the descendants of the people who wronged him, who may or may not remember the sort of wrongdoings at all. But at the same time, like, they are the reincarnated versions of like some pretty evil people. So yeah. Again, I'm pretty glad we didn't get any modern stuff in this one. I thought that the other Assassin's characters and NPCs, again, none of them were super compelling. There's the other master, I think her name's like Rasheen or something. I'm already forgetting her name. She's like the older woman who's like the master assassin. I thought she was sort of compelling, but then she sort of just literally walks away at the end, and I don't know, it almost felt like it was maybe a little hinted at that she might have inklings of past memories, which would make me think that she would be one of the former Isu people, which isn't Basim hunting those people down, or maybe I read too much in between the lines with that. But I was sort of disappointed that she just sort of walked away and just sort of like, well, that's that. But yeah, strong ending, weak the rest of it. All right, so with that, I'm going to wrap this up. Yeah, I may be playing Shadow soon, so there might be a review for that coming out eventually. I don't know how long that one is, but we'll have to see. But if you enjoyed this and if you want to see more content like this, please consider subscribing. If you have any of your thoughts on Mirage, I'd love to hear it in the comments. I actually genuinely read all the comments, and I would love to see some sort of discourse, some of your thoughts, because I don't have really anyone else to talk about this game with. So genuinely want to hear from you on that. But yeah, with all that said, I will see you in the next one. Bye.